Welcome to Pop and Play, the podcast all about play in its many silly, serious, and powerful forms, which we'll talk about today. I'm Haney Yoon.
And I'm Nathan Holbert. And today we have another play-adjacent topic that we wanted to pop off about. Music, but music as protest specifically. So just for a little bit of context, at the time of this recording, this is early February, the U.S. has been into months-long time of sustained protest, primarily in response to the government's deployment of troops and immigration agents in Los Angeles, Chicago, Minnesota, and also elsewhere throughout the U.S. Citizens have been overwhelmingly peaceful as they've been documenting and protecting one another from this intrusion into civil liberties, whereas government officials have been violent and multiple people have been injured and killed, most recently Renee Good and Alex Preddy, specifically in Minnesota.
Woo, that is very heavy. And so we think about the horrors inflicted by our government on its own people and its own community. But in the meantime, simultaneously, the Grammy Awards just happened this past weekend, and there's been a lot of chitter-chatter about the intersection of music, protest, activism. And we were like, we should do an episode on that.
Yeah.
But then we were like, we are not the people to do an episode on music, protest, and activism. I can say that I'm an appreciator of music. Some of my musical tastes are very questionable, right?
I would never say that.
I think people have said that. I think our guest has actually said that to me at some point. But in the midst of it, we've seen some of that rise up and happen, right? So recently in the news, we have Bruce Springsteen, we have Bragg, both who have created and released music in response to what is happening in Minnesota and what is happening just overall in the landscape of our political climate these days. And these songs are an outgrowth of a very long history of where music has played a role in that, right? So it's not our goal today. We are not going to give you a history of music and activism lesson, but we wanted to take this time to think about what this means for our landscape and where music, the celebration of music and the beauty of music and the aesthetics of music has really brought people and community together.
Yeah, and thank you for taking us out of the deep well of sadness for some of the real specifics here. But, you know, it's important to kind of look at this both in the moment of the context of the moment, as well as you said, the sort of long history and also the global history of this work. And so even though Haney and I frequently break out into song
Would you like me to start?
in the middle of episodes, and we should apologize to you all for that. I'm very sorry. We thought we should actually ask an expert to come and help us out. So we've invited our friend and colleague Patrick Schmidt, professor of music and music education at Teachers College, to help us think through all this. Welcome, Patrick.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be part of this program. I've been watching and listening to the podcast, so it's really a pleasure to be here and to talk about music. Although, from our conversations, you're as much as an expert as I am on some of these things. So, but we might have some different views on it.
We're in trouble.
Thank you, Patrick, for being modest, but we all know that is untrue.
So, okay, we this, as we said, this is an absurdly massive topic. I kind of texted Haney when I saw the Bruce Springsteen and the Billy Bragg songs. I was like, oh, this is so cool. We should maybe release an episode. And then the more we started thinking about it, the more we're like, this is huge. This is really, really big. And as Haney said, we can't cover the full history here, but we do want to kind of dabble into it and start to think about the ways in which music and play and these various kinds of forms can be part of how we, create solidarity, how we create resistance, and this stuff has been going on for as long as we've been making music and recording it in some form or other, right? It's the civil rights movements, it's environmentalism, it's class struggle, it's war, it's state violence, on and on and on and on, and it's happening all over the world. Maybe we could just start by inviting you to say a little bit about how you came to this. I know you've done a little writing on music as protest. How did you enter into this area of research or this space?
I think that, there's a great, sociologist and kind of cultural theorist, Tia Denora, British, that has a great book that talks about music as a kind of technology of self, right? Is the idea that you use music in a daily way from, pastime to while you're doing chores. But, of course, another side of that is you kind of create yourself through and with music. Right? And I think that that's very powerful here in the sense that, there's always a connection to, to music in individuals, right? In fact, it's kind of a thing in music education that nobody quits music. Students quit music teachers, but they definitely don't quit music, right?
Yeah.
There's something that is quite powerful there. That's partially the aesthetics, partially is the potential for the participatory part of it is, trying to think through issues that, kind of normal discourse practice don't quite get at, that arts in general and certainly music does. So for me, grew up with music and grew up, engaging in music making, being in bands, being in, classic as well as kind of rock
you've
bands.
been in a band?
Oh, yeah. I have an LP at home. Actually,
What's the name of the band? What do you play?
I played the guitar and I sang, and it was Secondary Access. That's the name of that.
Awesome.
Very
That's
typical 1990s kind of.
And what kind of music is it? Is it like
It's like
pop
prog rock kind of thing. So we were into the skill, but
Love
That's
it.
great.
yeah, it was an amazing experience. I also grew up in Brazil. I was born and raised in Brazil. My family's in Brazil, and I grew up in the midst of the kind of second half of 25 years of dictatorship.
Right.
So, in fact, the 70s were perhaps the most repressive time in Brazilian history in terms of that dictatorship. And in about very late 60s, early 70s, there was a series of what they call AIs, which were the equivalent to a kind of executive order here in the States that the military put together, and parts of that were connected to curtailing civil rights, which end up later on recrudescing, becoming all the way to kind of habeas corpus kind of suppression, all those kinds of things. Yeah. There was a lot of protest music that was happening during that time. Some of my my favorite artists from Brazil at that time is Chico Buarque, who has written incredible things. And when I was growing up, when I was a little, kind of high school age, was, Brazil in 85 was the first time Brazil had, direct elections in 25 years. And I was all over that, right? And it was so, it was kind of out in the streets, protesting, engaging, all the conversations in high school, kind of lived around that. So I think there's a long kind of connection to that. And to me, it was always an interesting thing that protest music, as we were experiencing there was like a recent history. There's obviously a kind of a political expediency to the fact, that, and of course you're young and you're 14, and things like you live those in a very intense ways. And I was also in a band, so we were like going to change the world.
It's like the perfect
right,
juice
it
for
was
that.
Great. It was just like perfect timing. And you have, I think, in Brazil, because of that history, you have in Brazil, so, Chico Buarque has two songs, like Apesar de Você and Construção, which is, Despite of You and Construction, which are like masterpieces, and people recognize them as such. And in fact, when the Bolsonaro kind of presidency was ending a few years ago, and there was this kind of same, nonsense that happened here in 2020 about rigged elections and all that, some of these songs returned, and they really brought hundreds of thousands of people to the streets, which was really an impactful kind of moment. But people were disappearing, people were leaving. There was like serious repression, right? So for instance, Apesar de Você, it's like a samba kind of thing going on there, which, ostensibly is about, the rooster singing and thinking that if he doesn't sing, then the sun's not going to come out. Right? And which was a direct, obviously, kind of critique of the main, guy that was running the military, kind of, which led him to leave the country. They kind of fled for 5 years, and his songs were not played anywhere. And then, which I think is interesting to me, because I think that part of kind of protest songs is not just the in-your-face aspect of it, but it's also the subtle, the comic, the ironic, the satirical, right?
Yeah.
But I think that there is also, an aspect that can be quite serious, can be quite profound. And because I am interested in music and art, there's something that relates to, but not just the music and the lyrics, but it's also the form, right?
Yeah.
And Construção is an incredible song that it's the same verse repeated 3 times, and each time that the verse is repeated, lyrics, internal lyrics are kind of reassembled. And the story, the first time you see it, is about this guy who wakes up and kisses, his spouse and then his children, and goes to work and has talks to everybody, and then he ends the day with a beer, and then returns to his construction site. This is supposed to be the kind of working class, right?
Yeah.
Representing working class in Brazil, and jumps off the building.
Jesus.
Right, and each time this repeats, it's kind of reconstructed, right, and kind of showing the multifaceted. This is not a single thing; it's not easy, and I think it shows really the complexity of the potential for protest songs, right? It's the in-your-faceness is not always the necessary. That in fact it can bring people to think about a reality in quite significant ways without inciting, right? So without being direct. And so I think that's fascinating to me. I'll stop talking right now.
Yeah,
But
as you were telling these stories, it kind of made me think, because I feel like that connects to something I was thinking this morning. I'm like, what counts as a protest song, right? Like, what actually is a protest song? And like, if you think about Bruce Springsteen's newest song, right, it's definitely in direct, explicit response, like what you're saying, like an in-your-face response.
Not a lot of subtlety in it.
Yeah, no subtlety. But then I think there's also some songs where the band or the person didn't necessarily intend for it to be a protest song, but then it becomes like an anthem of a movement or a time, or it's so relatable to someone's lived experience that they take up that song because it is really like resonant with the things and the difficulties and the traumas, maybe in the violence that they're going through at that exact moment. And so it's really interesting, the story that you brought up of Bolsonaro, right? And the resurgence of songs that were not necessarily written for that time period, but then become something that resonates at that particular juncture.
Yeah. I had similar thoughts, and I was trying to. I didn't try to come up with a full taxonomy, but I was trying to think.
I don't doubt that you didn't come up with the full taxonomy.
Spreadsheet, my glasses
I know,
on.
Seriously.
But I was trying to think, like, what are the different kinds of songs that we might think of as protest songs? And I kind of had this, like, well, there's these specific events, these inciting events that lead to a protest song. It's your obviously the Springsteen one, but I was thinking of the song Ohio by Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, right, which is like very clearly a response to an event. The song is pretty explicit in what it's about. There's obviously these sort of songs about kind of broad, but broad feels wrong to say, injustices that are felt throughout many different experiences. NWA's The Police is a very good example of that. And there's also like songs about hope, right? I was thinking, you look at, Bob Seeger, you have all these songs that feel like anthems of hope, but are also pretty explicitly protest songs, or have been taken up as protests. So I don't know that. I know it's not a complete taxonomy, but it does feel like there's all these like different ways in which these things are formed, are used, are taken up, whether it's intentional or not. Yeah, what is the taxonomy? You're the expert.
I think that resonates, and in fact, I do have a little bit of a taxonomy here, so ready to go. And I think that there is a sense of this kind of labor protest and class-based protest, right? So that has been going on for a long time, not just in the States, but throughout the world, right? And I think that the kind of Woody Guthrie's, it can be very specific, or it can be talking union, or it can be very broad. I think that there is this kind of racial anti-colonial kind of thing going on
Yeah.
too. And there's a lot of people, doing really thoughtful and interesting analysis on all those kinds of things. Paul Gilroy is a sociologist that does kind of amazing things with this, or Angela Davis and relationship to Tricia Rose has an incredible book, like seminal thing on hip hop and kind of thinking about hip hop as a cultural expression and against a particular repressive, state writ large.
Yeah.
There is, of course, all the traditions, in spiritual and protest songs.
Yeah.
There is this kind of sense of explicit political, that I think it's perhaps the most, far-reaching and with the most. Certainly Ohio is one of my favorites, and that's an incredible song. And there's also a song connected to people that are real activists too, like Neil Young, right?
Yeah.
People that will. I think that part of this and the connection to art is, what are the stakes? I think that's one way to talk about protest songs and how they function and the people that are connected to them, right? But for sure, there's a sense also of the song as this kind of idea of kind of the prefigurative, right? What could be as well. It was like trying to push an idea, kind of connected to, kind of future actions and, mobilizing those kinds of things as well. So I think that there is lots of potential within that taxonomy. There's not just about regulating the kind of qualities, but it's to see and to show how embedded in living those things are, right? And how emergent from experience they are constantly, it is a constant wellspring, so to speak, right? Because the expression, the possibility is always there, the need is always there, the urge is always there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like the Billy Bragg song kind of has a little of that vibe to it, right? It's a very much a like, are you going to be like this other a-hole throughout history? And then there's also kind of this aspect to it which feels like it could be a chant at a protest that you might like join in with, which is kind of interesting. So it kind of is creating the conditions for, I don't know. I thought
there's people in music that talk about the separation between the kind of thing that is more listening based, right, a little bit more passive, which of course is where we started with Tia Denora and all this kind of sense of how do we live our lives. In other folks that say, well, is a protest song if it is not lived in some way, right? Is a protest song by itself a thing, or does it have to be part of a moment, right? No matter, it doesn't need to be a movement, is what I mean, but it's like, it is only a protest song when you're actually in the street doing something or in a meeting, right? Yeah. So acting with and through it in some form.
Yeah. I mean, so to bring it back to this current moment, I'm thinking about that K-pop Demon Hunter song. Okay.
Yeah.
So, I really like Golden. And I feel like it's not a song about being Asian. It's not a song about making visible like Asian American identity. But for some reason in my mind, I'm like, it's about Asian Americans. But not that it is, but I also feel like there's something about who sings it, like who brings it to the forefront, like who's the creator of this song, like the meaning that it has, like that I know that it has personally for the writer of the song, EJ, right? And what it meant for her journey and trajectory. And you can't help but put those things on the song too, right? That it's not just the words and the lyric. It's not just that it's out in the streets or not out in the streets, but that there is like an identity, like what you said at the beginning, attached to it.
Yeah, I think that's the amazing thing that we're living right now because of technology mainly, right? And how pervasive that is, how access to some of this information becomes. I think that, if you think of Seeger or Guthrie or Dylan and, the kind of, there's a kind of a time lag, right, on how these things, and there's a locality too to it, right? It was much more kind of focus in a way, which in some ways kind of created a connection to community in a different way. But today it is much easier to identify, to make a connection, and to, to kind of bring the emotive to the aesthetic to the personal in kind of closer proximity, right? And I think that matters, and it matters in mobilizing, and it matters on also kind of identity aspects of people's lives. But I think that the other side of that is that what is the role of consumption and this, right? Is protest songs being used for car advertisements and
right.
that kind of thing. It's this kind of capital generating aspect of it, which is kind of hard to dissociate today in some ways, right?
Yeah, I feel like the song "Fortunate Son" has shown up in so many commercials.
Oh my God, it's crazy, right? Yeah,
it's like maybe not.
It is such a great song too. It's like
a good
an
song.
amazing song, right? Filled with metaphor, filled with other connections that are very critical to kind of social critique.
And that had a very specific point in the context in which it was released too, right?
Yeah.
I wonder, okay, just as a more fun too, like what are some of the songs, some of the protest songs, some of the songs that we may or may not fit as a protest frame that you enjoy, Haney, you as well. I can start and just say that I'm a sucker for Bruce Springsteen, as Haney knows.
Which is a solid choice.
Thank you.
Yes.
Right.
Just like Taylor.
That was close. I was worried about all
Bruce,
the judgments.
Taylor,
It's the same thing.
Same.
my
It's
God.
the same. I love the song "American Skin" though. 41 Shots, and I think particularly when you hear him do it live, you can sort of sense it's a version that he did live in New York, and this is a song about a shooting in New York of an innocent person, and you can just feel like the anguish and the sadness and the seriousness of it. But it's also just an incredibly beautiful song that like has this great like guitar wail in the middle and all these things, and that's one of my favorites. I also really like the song "War."
That's a great song.
Any song that has like "Good God, y'all" and like as a written lyric, I think is okay in my book.
And an incredible bass line in the back. Yeah.
What do you got?
Oh my God, I have a huge list here.
Okay,
I
go
think
on.
that, I love, if you're thinking about American history, and particularly in terms of oppression, you can't beat Strange Fruit, right? Billie Holiday.
Yeah.
And it's just this kind of incredible, the manner in which he sings and, obviously all the meaning behind it is just incredible. And I think that is, we talked about Ohio. I think that's amazing, particularly the way Neil Young, it's like horrible sounding voice, right? But it's perfect for a song like that. And I think that's an incredible song. I love the way Dylan plays Masters of War, right?
Yeah.
And it connects to the guitar. There's a kind of more and more kind of almost virulent thing that happens as he goes through. The absurdity of it all becomes, more and more evident. And I love this. I think that, NWA is, you can't beat the Police. It's just, it's kind of an anthem, and it's so representative of that kind of,
God, and a response
area.
to so many different things that were happening for decades, right?
Yeah. There is a No Shoe that has a song that's just recent. That's called Ice. Right. So that's kind of a play on that. And there is I thought of you because there's a very, very funny line there that he says, I'm probably going to butcher it, but he says, at some point the music is about to start, and he goes, "For all you homies in the kindergarten, raise your crayons." Right? Which is again topical to what, the shit show that is happening in Minneapolis and how widespread the impact is on that, right? I like that very much. I think that Sam Cooke's "Time's Gonna Come." It's an amazing
that's
song.
Classic.
Together.
Yes.
Buffalo Springfield, For What's Worth.
Yep.
It's another one. There's a great Sonic Youth. I don't know if people know Sonic Youth
Oh my
anymore.
God, yes.
But it's a great,
Reminds me of my youth
You
that
just-
was
yeah,
yesterday.
right.
You just got excited about the word youth.
Exactly.
And then you have things like White Riot by The Clash. There's that kind of sound, the kind of punk thing, and how rebellion protests are kind of aligned. So those are a few.
Yeah, what do you got, Haney? Any stand
Oh
out
my
for
God,
you?
you know what? I cannot contribute to this conversation
What?
because my last 2 years, my Spotify rap is basically just Taylor Swift songs.
Oh, my goodness.
So does that kind of subtle protest? I'm just kidding. It is not subtle protest. I'm sorry. Taylor, you should write a protest song.
Protest
though.
song, let's
yeah.
go.
Yeah.
You heard
do
it here first.
Yeah. Yes, do it. Do it.
You're wondering about. I mean, so Haney, you had mentioned to me when we were talking about this kind of offline about the Grammys, which I hadn't watched.
Yeah.
So I didn't see this, but apparently, like, I mean,
Yeah.
it's not just right. It's not just we've already said it's not just
Yeah,
Bruce
yeah.
Springsteen and Billy Bragg. Even in the moment, there's a lot of response. There's a lot of ways in which artists are kind of stepping out and having conversations about this through their art as well as through any opportunity to speak in a microphone.
Yeah. I mean, I thought of, Patrick, what you were saying earlier about how there's these musical forms that are sort of like an explicit, like, this is exactly what I'm saying. There's no like underlying meaning or hidden meaning behind it. And then there's music and forms that are sort of sarcastic or take a metaphorical look at something, or something where you're supposed to kind of read between the lines, whether it's comic or sadness or something like that, right? And recently in the Grammys, I feel like the Grammys kind of was this conversation starter. I mean, obviously, like, the awards are part of it, but the other part of it is like, what are musicians going to say at this particular juncture?
Right.
When all the stuff is happening in Minnesota, are they going to be political or not, right? And so you have, on the one hand, you've had several artists that are like, I'm not trying to be political, right? I'm trying to stay out of politics, and so they're not going to really say anything. Then you have people like Billie Eilish, Bad Bunny, which the Super Bowl is probably going to be passed by the time this comes out, but the Super Bowl is going to be boring this year. The only thing that's going to be cool is Bad Bunny. So, obviously,
Wow.
so this Sunday
Wow.
is Bunny Bowl.
Nobody cares for the football, but Bad Bunny for sure.
Not the football. But, like, he obviously had a very strong stance on ICE, a very strong stance on the political climate. And, obviously there's a lot of response to that, whether it's positive, negative, so on and so forth. And so I thought we should have a conversation about what we think about this. Like, you don't have to have an opinion about it, but I think it also speaks to a larger thing of, in the positionings that we all have in our different settings, right? Like, what is the role or that we are supposed to take in our separate platforms and where we are, and what are the different roles that people need to take? And, I think it's not an enduring question just for musicians, right? Or just for people who are at the Grammys, right? It's for all of us. Like, what is our role and what is our position? What is the thing that we can do to contribute? It's a big question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that in art, right, this has been, a big part of that, because it's always in some form or another in public, right? What you're doing is other-oriented, right? So there, in some ways, there is no private life, right? Or at least one that is recognizable by, somebody beyond you and your circle of friends or family. And I think that becomes a really consequential kind of decision in terms of, it might derail your career.
Yeah.
What Dixie Chicks a few years ago, when Bush, they just totally got
that's a great example.
got canceled, right?
Yeah.
And they really stood firm, and they wrote music, about the effect, the shut up and sing kind of situation. And of course, there's the gender thing that comes in, and the Southern thing that comes in. But I think that was one of those moments that was, really, really consequential. And I think that anybody that just wants to continue to make a living in that space is having multiple, thoughts.
Yeah.
I mean, Bad Bunny is in a great position to do what he did because, not only because of who he is, but in terms of, his connection to Puerto Rico and to that immediate population that's been targeted in the States so horribly today. But I think that his prevalence. I mean, that he is in a position of power in some way, right? Which is always another aspect here. But it is a in our lives, in our spaces, including here, it's a very difficult decision to make, and it's just as difficult to figure it out how to do that collectively as well. Yeah, right.
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate what you said about the compounding of race and gender and ability and citizenship and all of that related to how we're going to protest and what we're going to say and how that's going to get scrutinized in our lives. Because I often think about how the stakes for certain people, like it's not lost on me that a lot of the artists that we mentioned are white men, right? And that the stakes are high for them, but the stakes are differently applied to somebody who has a different identity politics and how it's going to get read right in the social scene.
I mean, we talked about NWA, and they were abhorred, right?
Huge
at a certain
backlash,
point. I mean, that was just people. I mean, there were like elections shifted by that
the
kind
parental
of
advisory
right,
level
exactly.
came about because of that.
Policy generated because of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if I said this on the podcast yet, but I mean, one thing I feel like I've been saying a lot in the past, God, it's been a year. Longer than a year. 10 years.
AI. Just kidding.
Is that when everything is a mess, when everything is doing poorly, anything you can do is useful. Like any skill you have, any capability you have, any time you have will have value when everything's a mess. And so I think this idea that, and not that you guys are saying, but the idea that I think oftentimes we have is, gosh, I don't know how I can contribute whenever this big, huge thing is happening. Well, it's like, there's thousands of ways you can contribute in your own neighborhood and your own community. And I think that's what's one of the reasons that the Minnesota example has been so incredibly powerful. It is hyper local. It is neighbors looking out for one another. It is people seeing the people around them as their neighbors, as their community, regardless of all sorts of different kind of demographics or categories we might try to sort ourselves in. And, it's people who like hear a whistle being blown and they come outside of their other house wearing their robe still, and they turn their phone on and they start trying to document, start trying to bear witness. I mean, that's one thing. And then if you're in a place where that's the action you should be doing, then great. But there's a thousand other things that we can all be doing. And those things can be local. Those things all matter. And we each have to figure out what those are for us. And it doesn't have to be big, but it's important.
Right. Yeah.
I think that I absolutely agree with that. I think that what is interesting to me to think about, music in general, not just protest music, but how we use and make music, right, is that, the question of silence and being silent or creating noise or, being in kind of noisy, kind of creating in a sense of disturbance, right, or disruption of, that at times is necessary. Those things. And so the other side of what you're saying to me is solidarity has a direction, right, and which is amazing to see it. In fact, I was thinking about how amazing it would be to actually be part of the community, even though the conditions are so horrid, right? But there is this kind of sense of solidarity formation that we don't see oftentimes. Obviously generated by an absurd reality, and yet there is an aspect of that is very human, right? That I think music continues to connect. There's a lot of people that talk about, the kind of the ritualistic aspect of what music does and what it is, right? Obviously in settings like church or, but also in communities and, concerts, right? You create a slightly different reality, and the connection to it comes only because of it, right? I mean, the music industry is, with the disruptions in the 90s, shifted towards live music because one, they were not getting paid anything by all these platforms, but two, because people recognize that it's amazing to have music in your pocket, but it's a very different thing when you go to a concert, when you're with people where you're playing or whatever it is, right? So that kind of capacity to generate solidarity, I think, is also another important connection to it.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point. Yeah, and bringing people together and what that actually does. Yep.
Yeah. This has been great. Thank you for helping us kind of think through some of these very, very big issues and also to kind of explore this in a playful way.
And didn't Patrick promise us he's going to send us a playlist?
Oh, yeah, you did.
I have it.
Yes, that all of our listeners will have access to.
Perfect. We'll put that in the show notes. We'll put also some of the other things that we mentioned here today in the show notes as well. And just, as we sort of sign off here, I want to give a quick shout out to people in Minnesota right now.
Absolutely.
We're thankful for who you are and for what you're doing. We love to see, the way you support one another and your neighbors and your community. And I think that demonstrates for all of us the importance of courage and of bearing witness in times like this. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. That was fun.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right. We'll see you in a few weeks.
Okay,
Bye.
Bye.